Hi, I'm Don Gray. Welcome to Artist and Critic. We're doing something a little different on Artist and Critic for this program. In the past, as you know, we've been interviewing well-known figures in art, both artists and critics. Among the artists have been Jack Levine, Raphael Sawyer, Isabel Bishop, Richard Estes, Audrey Flack, Philip Sherrod, Dick Cunningham. And some of the critics have been John Cannaday, Dory Ashton, Sophie Burnham, and Cindy Nemser and others. And we've been discussing what makes the art world go around, what are some of the problems, what are some of the directions that are taking place. And I thought perhaps it might be informative to tell you in an informal discussion with my wife, actually, who's going to be joining me as co-host and perhaps interrogating me and just more or less discussing our life in art so that you know where we are coming from.
And I might say this is extremly informal and unrehearsed.
It's absolutely off the top of our head, so that
we didn't know we were doing it 10 minutes ago.
It just depends, whatever turns out will take place. Jessie, we first came to New York in 1962, and I remember from the University of Iowa where we got master's degrees, and I remember thinking, oh boy, here we come to the big art town where we're going to see the museums and the galleries and so forth. And I must admit, one of my first feelings after going up and down Madison Avenue was one of shock, really, on seeing the work and being surprised at how bad it was, really, quality-wise. It really wasn't saying anything, I thought, at the time, and I was rather surprised and shaken by it.
I remember that. Now, what didn't you like about it? What was happening? This was the early 60s.
Yeah, it was the early 60s, and I think I'm thinking generally that it seemed to be a superficial art, one based on formula.
Well, that was just when pop art, op art, and the large movements of the early 60s were coming into fore, weren't they? The end of the abstract expressionism?
Yeah, I think pop art had killed abstract expressionism by 1960, but it just seemed that pop art to me seemed to be a cynical movement, really. They were attacking, I suppose, some of the commercial aspects of society, although a lot of people feel that pop art was simply telling it like it was, saying that we are a commercially oriented society, but it seemed like they weren't doing it with any redeeming features about their work. It was sort of a cold-blooded kind of a cynical reaction to life and some of the problems we were facing. I think I was looking for an art that was a little more warm-blooded than that, perhaps.
Do you feel that art should do more than just reflect society? Is that what you found missing? Because indeed pop art did reflect beautifully that society and our society.
Well, I think one of the problems was that, to me, in our society, let me back into the question a little bit, it seemed that we're living in a technological society, and I feel really that it has lost touch with people, with individuals as human beings, with the feelings that people have and the yearnings that they have for fulfillment. And I felt that if an art simply reflects that society, that technological society, the impersonal society, that it was simply adding to the burden of the essentially dreary lives that so many of us had to live, the burden of that impersonality. So that's what bothered me about it, particularly. I didn't care that the art was concerned with aesthetics or some of it was two-dimensional and so forth, although that, to me, is shallow after a time, but it was just that it was adding to problems rather than, if not trying to solve them, offering other alternatives. That, to me, was a problem.
Let's go to you personally. You went to school.
Where? I went to Arizona State University, and
in 19...
Yeah, I graduated in 1957, then got a master's at the University of Iowa in '62, and that
What oriented you toward art? What changed you? You had a football scholarship.
Yeah, I did, but I don't know. I wasn't as interested in football as I had once been, and I was trying to go in other directions, and I finally did go into art. And,
what led you there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd always drawn, but I'd forgotten about it for a period during my high school years when I was playing football. And my mother suggested, why don't you go into art? It's as simple as that. And that's why I went into it.
A highly impractical mother. Most mothers
Yeah. You know,
say, please don't go into art.
Go into a money-making situation. But that, I was always interested in reality, I think. To me, reality is the major challenge for an artist to face, to try to make art from it. And that has always been my major stress, although I dabble with abstraction when I was a student, as many people do. They experiment in many different ways. But
well, now reality is different to everyone.
Visual reality, I'm talking about. And I'm not saying
what is
copying.
Visual reality to you?
Well, I don't want to get too philosophical about
well,
this.
But
I think great artists have looked at the world, and I think they have reacted to it, and I think they have interpreted it. I don't mean that they blindly copy it, but they use it as the inspiration for what they're trying to express. I think you put paintings by 60 of the greatest artists who have ever worked, and you line them up together, and you cannot say that this one got reality or this one got reality. They all got portions of reality.
Filtered through their own personality?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, people say that it has to have a great design to it, and it does have to, but I think what makes great art is they begin to go deeper into themselves, and they search out some of the deeper issues in life. You know, I mean, what is the meaning of life? What is their feeling toward it? And so forth. And I think that adds some profundity to it. Don't you think?
Did you learn to paint in school? When did the real learning process take place for you as a painter?
Well, I learned, I think, to be aware of color in school. And that was the one thing I learned. I think I learned about art by doing it, working at it for years and years and years.
Was this in the early 60s in New York City?
No, it started before that. It started immediately after college in the late 50s and so forth. We've been in Colorado and New Mexico and on through Iowa and now to New York. And it's just been a constant work and constant thinking and constant working. And I've evolved, as you know, through a number of things, painting landscapes, still lives and people in all the media, from drawing media and pastel and watercolor and so forth. And it's been a struggle. It has been hard, but it coming to grips with yourself, with myself, it always is for artists. It's hard. And it just comes through years and evolving. And I'm moving away from landscapes a little bit now. I used to have to get out. I felt that if I didn't get out of the studio and in contact with reality, I wasn't creating legitimate work. And whether it was in the country going out into the fields or here in New York going to the pardon me, I'm burping on the air. Going out into the streets and doing people on the streets and that kind of thing. But now, I seem to be going more into the studio and
would you say that you're using objects more and more symbolically? I would say you were, folks.
You would? Well, again, it gets back to if a person is serious.
I don't know whether we're supposed to be formal or informal, but I don't feel very formal.
Well, if a person, I think I'm just trying to express some ideas. That's the basic reason for doing this, I think, is why I feel we're doing it.
And
is that in all great, I think, artists who are serious about it realize that everything that you look at has character and substance to it and meaning. As we look around the studio, whether we look at the people or cameras or the water cooler or the rubber palm plants, the plastic palm plants, or the empty cardboard boxes, they all have character. They all have something unique in each of these objects. And I think what I'm saying is that the artist who is searching and trying to be profound, let's put it that way, senses the character in these objects, and he sees in these objects meaning in them, as I think Blake said, that the meaning of the universe can be found in a grain of sand. I'm paraphrasing it. It may not even be Blake, but the idea, I think, is what I'm trying to say. I say that when I'm painting and I look at something as simple as this cup, and it's a crude, crummy, cheap, although not so cheap anymore, dime store coffee cup. There's something of meaning about life and the universe, if that doesn't sound too grandiose, in the form of this cup. And I think, to talk about still life painters, I think Cézanne saw this. I think Chardin saw this. I think Van Gogh saw this. I think all the great painters see the character in these that make life meaningful, and if you can see this in objects and you can paint it, you come up with profound paintings. I think that's one reason their pictures are profound. And of course it applies to people. You search for character as well as facial structure, you know, the emotional content in the person as well as the emotional content in this cup.
And it's all filtered through your own personality. Yeah. So of course 20 million people could paint the same subject and there would be no two paintings alike, simply because you cannot divorce it from your personality.
Exactly. And let me add one thing to that. I thought that this came, it'll be short and then it'll come back to you. I think that's when people say that realistic painting has been done and something else has to be done, it's one of the great fallacies of our time because of this sense of renewed vision, this renewed contact with life, the renewed point of view that has developed with every generation, with each individual. That's the whole hope in life and art, as far as I can see it, is that everybody approaches it with a new insight, and someone will see the character and the beauty in this essentially commonplace. It's crummy, I grant you, but there's a beauty in this and a meaning that will change and be seen by succeeding generations of artists. The world is never dead, it's never empty, and new artistic possibilities are always there. I think when we start to lose sight of our artistic possibilities is when we retreat into the studio and we begin to work from a formula that the more we work from it, it becomes more empty and more sterile. You know, do we put 3 stripes or 2 stripes in our next painting? And it's painful to me when I see so much possible and artists will limit themselves to these tiny, narrow
Isn't it dangerous for every artist? Do you find yourself sometimes fighting against formulas? Do you finally struggle to learn how to do something artistically, how to form a certain object, and then have to fight against repeating it?
Not me. I've always have to struggle. Nothing ever comes easy to me, and it's just my personality or my abilities or the way I work with art. Some people find art, the manipulation of it, very easy, and they fall into formulas of how to paint a figure, how to paint a cup.
And then they too are legitimate artists, but have to keep fighting the formulas in themselves.
They're
right?
legitimate if they aren't overcome by the formula. If they're overcome by the formula, to me, that makes their art more hollow, you know, less meaningful. They become calendar painters. That's one reason calendar painters, they're realists, supposedly, but it's realism without bite, realism without character. The barn they paint is predictable. The autumn leaves are predictable. There's no insight into them. You know, I wonder, should we look at some of my pictures and we'll try to talk about some of them specifically. Here, we have our chords. And
we're hooked up, folks.
Let's see, let me move this out here and we'll tilt it.
Do you want me to hold them?
Well, why don't we just both get down by it and we can talk about it. Don't you want to come down here? Is that an uncomfortable position for you? This is behind glass and it may have some reflection problems, but what I've been talking about, the cup, that's the reason I painted this picture with the black and white Scotch carton with the squash in it. It just happened to be around the house. We were harvesting the garden in the fall. I'd picked the squash in the garden, put them in the box, and I thought visually it struck me. I thought it's a beautiful combination with the black and white and the oranges, orange squash necks curling out of the box. You were talking, Jessie, earlier about symbolism. You know, to me, a picture like this becomes symbolic because there's an emotional quality to it. It becomes a little bit more than the box. The squash suggests, to me, there's an emotional quality about it because I felt deeply about it as I painted it. And to me, maybe I'm saying that the squash and the box are me, in a sense. You know, I mean, I think artists identify with what they paint. And if I paint the box with enough character of the box, if I paint the squash with enough character of the squash, if I'm aware of how I'm arranging and laying out the picture, the aesthetics again, then I'm also probing the meaning of these objects. I feel like maybe I'm saying something of significance, you know?
Let's go to
And maybe I'm not, who knows? You know, I mean, that's the eternal struggle of the artist, hoping he's doing something that means something. And shall we go to a figure and then that one?
Okay.
And, the self-portrait, obviously, this is the one we used to open the show, one of two. And really, the inspiration of it was that I liked the combination of the shirt and the tie. I thought it was a great combination. I wore these on certain occasions, and
under duress.
Under duress, yeah. I don't like a tie, but it's one aspect of my personality. As an artist friend of mine has said, well, this is sort of your uptight side, and I suppose it is in a sense. You know, I'm sort of restricted by the tie and by the masonite I'm painting on and by the palette that I'm holding, and my arms aren't there, and I'm sort of pinioned. But I'm probing my personality. I'm trying to delve into some of the serious aspect of my personality, my thinking, and so forth, and I'm working with color.
How long did it take you to paint this?
Well, these are acrylics, and I'm becoming slower and slower as an artist. I used to paint 2 or 3 pictures a day. Now I may paint a picture in 3 weeks or a month or 2 months, and it's just, I'm working for more detail. I'm trying to round out and develop the forms more thoroughly, and, you know, working with color, like there's a green patch and a blue-gray patch, an orange patch, and a yellow ochre patch, and the forehead that goes from a red to a purple to a green to a yellow to an orange, and I'm trying to model with the color and using it expressively as well. I'm searching out myself. I'm looking for meaning in life through painting, I think. I think that's why people paint, partially, don't they? As well as to react to the beauty of the world.
Is that why you paint?
I think so, yeah, I think so.
Do you react to objects more intensely when you're painting than when you aren't?
No, I react to them all the time, and I think reacting to things, we'll go into the house and see things stacked around.
We certainly will.
To say the least.
They're never put away.
And I'll see something that catches my eye, like the squash in the box. Sometimes I'll set up something, like this picture you have in your hand here, with an art book about Rembrandt and a couple of dollar bills on it. And
what are you saying?
well, I'm glad you asked that. The reason I painted this was because I was very upset by the commercialism in art. I feel that's one of the problems that has led to so much art of so little meaning, in my opinion. I think artists, to speak about formulas, they'll find something that's successful, or a dealer will suggest that they do something which may sell. Then it does sell, perhaps, or it may not. But if it does sell, then the artist reaches a very, very dangerous stage in his career, because he has the struggle of deciding whether, do I continue to repeat this formula that will work and I make money from it, or do I say, oh, the hell with this, I've done it, it turned out well, maybe I'll do it for 6 months, but then when that inspiration runs out, he or she moves on to something else. You know, I mean, it's success for an artist is terribly dangerous, just as a lack of success can be dangerous in that it's depressing and may keep an artist from working. So success can be dangerous because the artist may lose touch with his own inspiration because he's trying to please somebody else, and then he is on very dangerous ground indeed.
Is there a happy medium?
I don't know. I haven't been tempted yet, so I don't know what the halfway point is. I think you try to keep your cool, I think, and keep in touch with your own inspiration, don't you?
Well, you certainly try, and if you feel yourself losing it, I think you just break out in any way, shape, or form you can through exploring unknown techniques and pushing yourself out of the familiar in terms of technique and maybe subject matter.
Willing to take a chance. Yeah, I agree with you completely.
An artist, from talking to Rayfield Sawyer, can never relax because once you feel yourself assured in your technique and able, then you're afraid you aren't pushing yourself enough. So that either you're too content or you're, even when you're content and assured, you're discontented because, what am I trying to say?
Well, you're saying it very well. I mean, artists are not meant to be too contented because they have to keep questioning themselves. Many of the great ones have. Renoir, as is well known, went through a period where, in his 40s, where he questioned his whole previous past art expression. And it's just the nature of art. You're questioners, you're searching observers. I think that's what an artist is.
Let's get to the last painting because the show's about to end.
Okay. And of course, I'm saying Rembrandt has been defamed by all the money attached to his name. You know, and sort of an ironic comment, really. And this is the theme, again, of this picture, the corruption of the artist in his studio. And of course, this is self-portrait again. We use it as the introduction to Artist and Critic. And it's another aspect of me, I suppose, running around in shorts with bandana around my head. I'm not saying that I'm corrupted necessarily, but any artist is subject to the pressures of commercialism in his studio, you know, in his life.
Why don't you explain this painting in the visual way?
You know, I suppose we could go even from the bottom up. Philip Sherrod, a very terrific artist, was on the show a few weeks, and he asked me if I arranged my pictures. I did arrange this one. I premeditatedly sort of thought about this, where others will just happen, like the squash. And I thought of it being almost the whole picture contained within a mirror. All this is a mirror image, except for the book, this hand, and the dollar. And I sat there, as you see me here, holding out this dollar. And I looked down on my hand and painted it as I had it here, you know, in a hand offering money, and the money interacts with a book called The Great Age of Frescoes, and I'm trying to think who the artist is. I think it's Pontormo, you know, and connecting money with this great art. And it just happened, well, I searched, let's put it that, I cold-bloodedly searched through the book for a picture that would suggest sort of greed and people lusting for money and power and so forth. So I let this picture, which is on the back of this, reflect here, and then began to be images of the object. Here is the reflection of this hand holding the dollar bill. This was a still life that just happened to be on a table in my studio. The two people back there are some visitors who I painted. That's a painting, that's not the people. And here was a picture painting that I had worked on, combining a plate of chicken heads with a reproduction by Goya. It's just barely visible here. And again, a comment about corruption in a sense.
Was it difficult to paint with one hand always holding a dollar bill?
No, it really was. That aspect of it was easy, but it was really a toughie of a painting to work. It took so long. And
I'm glad you finished it.
So long, yeah, I am too.
I watched it through various
I'm glad
stages.
it's done. But should we struggle back to our seats?
Well, let's struggle back to our seats and close the show.
About ready to wrap it up. But I don't know. I mean, I think an artist's life and career should be a continually ongoing, evolving thing. It's a question of just maintaining momentum, and you never know what's going to happen, what's going to develop from one day to the next. And what do you think? You're an artist yourself. What's your feeling about it?
I don't have time to say anything.
I yacked a lot, didn't I?
Take care. Keep plugging.
Keep plugging along.
We'll close out the show.